right. So this lecture is going to be on the Bill of Rights. I had you guys, read a little article. You had for the basic 10 amendments. You had to click a couple assignments. This lecture is just for anybody maybe who is having a difficult time or needs clarification on something. Again, the past week or so, we've been talking about different U.S. documents on, and the Enlightenment thinkers in terms of their impact on all these first American documents. You have the Declaration of Independence, as we talked about. We have the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Ordinance, and now on the U.S. Constitution. As we mentioned, the Articles of Confederation was an absolute disaster. It did not meet the needs for what our country needed at that time. Again, there was no president. There was no leader to run the country. The only branch there was a legislative branch composed of lots of people that all couldn't agree on things. You had small state versus large state debates. You had the first political parties that developed, that you guys learned about on Friday, with Federalists and Anti-Federalists that were clashing on what exactly needed to be done, in what direction that our country needed to go in terms of this new constitution. They couldn't agree on this new constitution. But ultimately, one of the things that they couldn't agree on was the Bill of Rights. The Federalists believed that the original draft of the Constitution didn't need to have a Bill of Rights. They felt like that's something that could have been added later. It wasn't necessarily important to have necessarily written. But the anti-federalists were afraid of large government, and they wanted to make sure that the average person, that all citizens were going to be protected under this document, that basically protections from the government. So as you guys see here, there's again, the Bill of Rights is in the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights is the 10 amendments. Now we have 27 amendments, but the Bill of Rights is the first 10. That's it. So First Amendment, as you guys read about, First Amendment is freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of assemble and right to petition. So some people argue this is, the most important right that we have, to be able to speak our minds or to express ourselves freely and have individuality. So here in our country, you can't necessarily favor a certain religion. Now, does that mean you can go out in the movie theater and yell fire? No. So there are some limits to the First Amendment. So kind of keep that in mind as we go forward with that. Chase, hold on one second, buddy. The Second Amendment is right to bear arms. That every citizen should have the right to own a weapon. This was used to make sure that governments weren't trying to strip guns from the people. So this was used for people to protect themselves from militias and from invading armies and that kind of thing. Third Amendment is no quartering of soldiers. This is directly from the British, in response to the British. Think back in your middle school class. British soldiers were quartered in colonist homes, and this outraged and angered many of the colonists to the point where they didn't want. This is something that the founding fathers wanted to include, that colonists would be protected from housing soldiers. Fourth Amendment, again, another very important right that we have is that your private property is protected, that police, law enforcement can't use unreasonable searches and seizures. They need a warrant. Now, again, what does unreasonable mean? So again, there are some limits to that. If there's a threat of imminent danger, they don't need a warrant. If police officers can, argue probable cause, then they don't necessarily need a search warrant. But more times than not, if they're investigating, then they need a warrant in order to search, private property. Fifth Amendment is indictments. Basically, so each individual, each criminal is, they have the right to due process, meaning that they have the right to have the rules of the law followed. They have their rights to be protected, meaning that, so the first part of this is, in terms of a right, would be no self-incrimination. Now, what does that mean? That means if you are in court, you don't have to go and testify. You don't have to go up and answer questions from the attorney. The attorneys are there in the state, the plaintiffs, they are there to prove your guilt or innocence. So you don't need to go up in front of the stand and answer questions. That's your Fifth Amendment right. So have you ever heard, like, plead the fifth? I don't need to answer any questions. That's kind of where that comes from. Also, double jeopardy. That means that you can't be tried twice for a crime. So meaning if you are charged with a crime and you're found innocent by a jury, they cannot retry you for that. So they call that double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for a crime. And then rules of eminent domain. We'll kind of get into that later. The Sixth Amendment, right to a fair and speedy public trial. So these really the fifth and sixth is specifically, I guess the seventh as well and eighth. They're meant specifically for criminals. They are, or people that are accused of a crime. It's for protections they have that have to be followed. So Sixth Amendment, right to a fair and speedy trial. So if you're charged with something, you have to be heard in a reasonable amount of time. You can't be sitting in jail for a year before you're even heard. So it has to be quick. You have to be confronted with the notice of your accusation. So what are you being charged with? You have the right to confront your accuser. You have a right to be subpoenas for witnesses for yourself. So your lawyer has a right to subpoena people who may have witnessed something to defend you. And you have a right to counsel, which means you have a right to a lawyer. Even if you can't afford one, one will be appointed to you. Seventh Amendment, right to a jury by trial in civil cases. So you have a right to have a jury trial. So why is that beneficial? If you choose to not have a jury trial, that means the judge will make the determination for innocent or guilt. So here's the thing. If you get the wrong judge, you have one person who is going to decide your guilt or innocence. Whereas if you have a jury trial, you have better chances. You need one juror now to think that you're innocent. So most criminal cases are held in a jury trial, because again, you have more members of a jury. You just need to convince one. Eighth Amendment is no excessive bail or fine. So for instance, if you go to the store and you steal a Snickers bar, you couldn't have the death penalty for that, or have your fingers chopped off. That's cruel and unusual. We've seen this in more recent cases with the death penalty. And how we've done that over the years with public hangings. That's been outlawed. Electrocutions in some states have been outlawed. So that's what they mean by that. 9. There are other rights not written in the Constitution. So the founding fathers, when they wrote this, they understood it was in the 1780s. They knew that time was going to change over the years. That what life was going to be like in the 1780s would be different from 2020. So they allowed flexibility for the Supreme Court to interpret, what protections that individuals would have from government. So common sense, I guess. And the 10th Amendment, that all rights not given to the federal government belong to the states and the people. So something's, again, brilliant by the founding fathers. If something's not specifically stated in the federal constitution, then that means the states have the right to choose. So for instance, education wasn't written in the Constitution. So states decide their educational systems. Licensures for doctors and teachers and hairdressers, again, that's a state issue. So just give you some examples of that. All right, so anyway, these were things that the Anti-Federalists truly fought for to be included, to make sure that we are protected. That's the whole purpose of this, that we are protected from government, from those that are in law enforcement, to make sure our rights are being protected. All right, so I just want to give this short lecture just to clarify any questions that you may have had. All right, thank you so much.